These ladies are getting quadruple their salary raises. Quadruple. Which one of you guys, you go into work and your boss says, here, we appreciate you guys. Here's 4x.
The WNBA just authorized a strike, and it's difficult to overstate how dangerous this moment is for the league. Not because players don't deserve to be paid well, they do, but because the strategy behind this decision feels completely disconnected from economic reality, timing, and leverage. What's unfolding right now may go down as one of the most self-destructive labor moves in modern professional sports. And the warning signs are everywhere.
What you're currently making. Who's complaining? Who's saying no? You see that? You see my people's eyebrow? Who's saying no? Who's complaining? Who's saying, oh yeah, but that's not enough for me?
The players are demanding 33% of league revenue. On its face, that sounds reasonable if you don't look too closely. But here's the detail that keeps getting glossed over, intentionally or not. The WNBA has never turned a profit. Not once, not in 28 years. Every single season of its existence has required subsidies from the NBA just to stay operational. That is an opinion. That's accounting.
The mischaracterizations. The Players Association is making it seem like the owners aren't trying to compromise. They're making it seem like the league isn't trying to negotiate.
So before we even get into revenue splits and labor rights, let's ask a basic question. If your employer walked into your office tomorrow and said, we're going to multiply your salary by 4, would you say no? Would you cross your arms and refuse because the structure of the offer didn't perfectly align with your philosophical ideal of fairness? Because that's effectively what's happening right now. The league's latest proposal would raise maximum salaries from roughly $250,000 to nearly $2 million over the life of the deal.
They're making it seem like the league isn't negotiating in good faith, and by everything that I've seen, the league is the one negotiating in good faith.
Average salaries would jump from around $120,000 to over $770,000. Minimum salaries would exceed $250,000 in the very first year. That's not a raise. That's a complete transformation of what it means to be a professional WNBA player. For most athletes, that would be life-changing money. And yet, the Players Union rejected it. Why? Because the proposal doesn't include a 33% share of revenue. This is where the conversation stops being about fairness and starts becoming about stubbornness.
NBA players are reminding me of, they remind me of that rich kid getting their first car, and they get mad when daddy gets them a C-Class Mercedes instead of the AMG. How dare you?
The league is offering 15% of net revenue, with uncapped growth tied directly to league success. The players want roughly 30 to 33% of gross revenue. That distinction matters more than almost anything else in this debate. Net revenue means what's left after expenses. Gross revenue means everything that comes in before a single bill is paid. Arena rentals, travel, staffing, marketing, insurance, production, security, none of that matters under a gross revenue model. The owner's position is simple. We cannot commit to a fixed percentage of gross income while operating at a loss. The player's position appears to be, that's not our problem. That's not negotiation. That's a demand made in a vacuum.
How dare you only give me the C-Class? I know you got money. Give me the AMG. I'm spoiled, I'm a brat, and I'm entitled to your money.
And here's where things get even more uncomfortable. The executive committee with the authority to authorize this strike includes players who have direct financial stakes in rival leagues. Brianna Stewart and Nafisa Collier are co-founders of Unrivaled, a competing 3-on-3 league. Nneka Ogwumike has ties to another alternative league project. If the WNBA shuts down or loses momentum, those leagues benefit immediately. That doesn't automatically make their actions malicious, but it absolutely represents a conflict of interest worth discussing. And yet, mainstream coverage has barely touched it. ESPN hasn't addressed it. Major outlets haven't questioned it. It's being treated as irrelevant, when in any other industry it would be front-page news. The league, for its part, responded with what might be the most professional version of a public rebuke you'll ever see. In its statement, the WNBA said it strongly disagrees with the Player Association's characterization of the negotiations, adding that those claims fundamentally misrepresent what's actually being offered. Translation: stop lying to the public. The league emphasized that it has proposed uncapped revenue sharing, immediate and historic salary increases, and benefits that would materially improve players' lives. And yet, The narrative being pushed is that ownership is being greedy. That framing collapses the moment you look at the numbers. Think of it like this. Imagine you're a teenager whose parents buy you a brand new Mercedes C-Class. Reliable, beautiful, expensive. But you wanted the AMG version. You wanted the upgraded engine, the custom interior, the prestige. So instead of appreciating the gift, you throw a tantrum because it's not the exact version you envisioned. That's the dynamic playing out right now, except the people involved aren't teenagers. They're adults negotiating the future of a professional league. And then there's the elephant in the room that nobody wants to address honestly. The recent surge in attention is not evenly distributed. The spike in ratings, attendance, and cultural relevance didn't materialize out of thin air. It came from one player, one rookie, Caitlin Clark. That doesn't mean other players aren't talented. It doesn't mean the league doesn't have depth or stars. But pretending this momentum is the result of decades of collective brand building is revisionist history. For years, the league struggled to attract casual fans. Then Clark arrived, and suddenly games were selling out, broadcasts were breaking records, and national conversation followed. The owner's position is simple. Prove this is sustainable. Show us that this attention remains when the novelty wears off. Show us that fans stick around beyond one generational talent. Then we can talk about locking in massive revenue guarantees. The players' response has been to demand that future success be paid out now, before it's proven to exist. That's not how businesses survive. What's especially alarming is how overwhelming the vote to authorize the strike was. 98%. That means only a handful of players, maybe 2 to 4, voted against blowing up a deal that would make them millionaires. That's not unity born of clarity. That's groupthink, reinforced by fear. In union environments, dissent is often framed as betrayal. Vote against the strike and you're not supporting your sisters. Never mind that you might be protecting your own career, your financial future, or the league itself. The social pressure to fall in line is enormous, even when the decision is objectively risky. The housing issue highlights this disconnect perfectly. The league proposed ending guaranteed housing for players with full contracts, something that aligns the WNBA with virtually every other professional sports league in the country. NBA players arrange their own housing. NFL players arrange their own housing. Meanwhile, the league would still provide housing for training camp players, short-term contracts, and mid-season trades. In other words, the most vulnerable players would remain protected under the league's proposal. Training camp invitees, short-term contract players, mid-season call-ups, and players traded on short notice would still receive housing support. The people most likely to be cut, displaced, or financially unstable would not be left scrambling. That was not an afterthought. It was explicitly built into the offer. And yet, union leadership publicly dismissed the proposal as unacceptable, framing it as an attack on player dignity rather than a structural compromise. At some point, personal responsibility has to enter the conversation. When minimum salaries exceed $250,000, the expectation that adult professionals secure their own housing is not exploitation. It is the norm across American professional sports. NBA players do it. NFL players do it. MLB players do it. Even most international leagues do it. Framing that expectation as a moral failure by ownership stretches the definition of injustice beyond credibility. Former MLB executive David Sampson addressed this reality without euphemism. He warned that the NBA will draw a firm line on revenue sharing, even if that decision ultimately leads to the WNBA shutting down. Not as punishment, not as a threat, as a business decision. Owners can accept losses for a vision they believe in, but belief is not infinite. Subsidization is not the same thing as sustainability, and eventually the numbers matter more than the narrative. History backs this up. Professional sports leagues do not survive indefinitely on goodwill alone. When costs continue to rise faster than revenue, something breaks. Every single year the WNBA operates at a loss. That gap has to be justified internally. The current proposal was an attempt to close that gap gradually while still delivering life-changing pay increases to players. Rejecting that framework outright sends a dangerous signal that compromise itself is no longer acceptable. And while negotiations drag on, something else is happening quietly in the background. Momentum is leaking away. Casual fans do not read collective bargaining updates. They do not parse revenue-sharing structures or understand the distinction between net and gross income. What they see are headlines about strikes, labor disputes, and instability. And when sports feel unstable, people disengage. Momentum, once lost, is almost impossible to recreate. This is where the irony becomes impossible to ignore. The league's proposal actually aligns incentives almost perfectly. Uncapped revenue sharing means that as the league grows, players grow with it. If television deals improve, salaries rise. If attendance surges, compensation increases. If sponsorship revenue explodes, so do paychecks. That is the definition of a partnership model. It rewards success without guaranteeing losses. What the union is demanding instead is a fixed percentage detached from profitability. That structure would lock owners into operating losses regardless of growth trajectory, regardless of expenses, regardless of market conditions. That is not empowerment. It is not leverage. It is a mathematical dead end. The players, or at least their leadership, appear to have fundamentally misread their leverage. They assumed fan support would be unconditional and permanent. They believed the public would rally reflexively behind any demand framed as player empowerment, but public reaction has been far more fragmented than expected. Scroll through comment sections, social media threads, and fan forums, and the message is unmistakable. Many fans are openly saying, "Let them strike." Others are saying, "We survived without the WNBA before." Some are even asking whether a league that cannot compromise should continue at all. That is not the response of a fan base poised to revolt on the players' behalf. And there is another uncomfortable reality the union seems reluctant to confront. If veteran players strike, the league does not automatically collapse. Rookies are under contract. Draft picks are under contract. International players would eagerly accept roster spots at salaries that still dwarf what they earn overseas. The quality of play would decline in the short term, yes, but so would operating costs. Owners could reset the league if forced to do so. Is that outcome desirable? Of course not. It would damage the product, alienate core fans, and stall development. But it remains an option, and ignoring that option weakens the union's negotiating position rather than strengthening it. For years, the dominant narrative was simple and widely supported. WNBA. Players deserve more money. Fans agreed. Media agreed. Ownership agreed, at least in principle. That consensus created the conditions for the current offer, which would dramatically reshape player compensation. But the narrative has shifted. What once sounded like a push for fairness now sounds, to many observers, like maximalism. Not equity, but entitlement. Not sustainability, but immediacy. To the average American worker, the optics are jarring. Athletes publicly rejecting seven-figure salaries because the percentage feels disrespectful. Professionals turning down financial security because the structure is imperfect. In a country where most people will never see a six-figure income, that disconnect is not theoretical, it is visceral, and it is growing by the day. None of this means players are wrong to advocate for themselves. It means leverage must be grounded in reality, not sentiment. Because when negotiations collapse under the weight of pride, principle does not pay the bills, and leagues that lose public trust rarely get a second chance to earn it back. The league's statement emphasized long-term sustainability for a reason. It's coded language for a hard truth. Give the players what they're demanding, and the league collapses within a few years. The owners aren't villains for acknowledging that reality. They're stewards trying to keep the doors open. The players, meanwhile, appear willing to gamble the league's future for immediate ideological victory. Some veterans are nearing the end of their careers. A canceled season isn't symbolic for them. It's lost time they can't recover. You can't deposit pride in a bank account. The media's role in all of this has been deeply disappointing. Coverage has been overwhelmingly one-sided, framing the players as heroic and ownership as oppressive without interrogating the numbers, the conflicts of interest, or the basic economic math. Net versus gross revenue is not a technicality, it's the entire argument. So here's where things stand. The WNBA has offered a deal that would radically change players' lives and raise the league's baseline forever. The players rejected it because it didn't meet an arbitrary percentage threshold. Now the league is staring down a strike that could erase its momentum, alienate new fans, and permanently damage careers. All of this not because players were being underpaid, but because they couldn't accept a historic win unless it came in the exact shape they demanded. When this gamble backfires, and there are signs it will, nobody should be able to say they weren't warned. The writing is already on the wall, and it's written in red ink.